film begins near the seaport of a European city. With songs and dances, young Willy Wonka arrives in the city. The aspiring confectioner plans to open his own candy store. Along the way, he spends almost his last money to polish his shoes and pay for a broken pumpkin. Later, in the middle of the street, Wonka engages in a dance, but no one sees this performance except him. The boy's peculiar behavior attracts the attention of a police officer, but for a small reward, the man lets the confectioner go. In the evening, strolling through the city streets, Wonka gives his last money to a woman with a child. Because of this, he has to spend the night on a bench. There, he is noticed by an unpleasant man named Bleacher. He offers the boy to stay overnight at Mrs. Scrubit's place. Wonka introduces himself to the woman as a magician and promises to pay as soon as he earns some money. Mrs. Scrubit suggests signing a contract. Despite the small print, Wonka agrees to put his signature. The confectioner does not see how Bleacher prepares to hit him from behind in case of refusal. The next day, Wonka goes to the city center to show his candies to the people. Local chocolatiers, owners of candy factories, notice his presentation. The trio descends to taste the candies, hoping to criticize the young confectioner. But the taste and levitation effect of the candies make them silent. Surprised people gladly buy all the candies. However, the police, previously summoned by the trio of the chocolate mafia, stop the trade of unlicensed products. In addition, they confiscate all the income from sales, but one of the police officers leaves Wonka one coin to pay for accommodation. Arriving at the apartment, Wonka learns that he needs to pay a hefty commission. Since the boy does not have such money, he will have to work it off. Bleacher throws the boy into a pipe that leads to an underground laundry. There, deceived visitors work off their debt. After the end of the working day, the workers disperse to their rooms. Noodle, an orphan, visits Wonka, the underage girl who previously tried to warn Wonka about Mrs. Scrubit's deceit. The confectioner tells about his deceased mother who taught Willy to make chocolate but unfortunately never revealed the most important secret. The boy gives Noodle a candy and offers a lifetime supply of sweets if she helps him escape. Together, they manage to develop a rescue plan. Meanwhile, the police chief visits the church. He goes down to the basement of the cathedral, where the secret headquarters of the Chocolatiers is located. The trio of monopolists bribes the officer with chocolate to make him eliminate the promising confectioner named Willy Wonka. Unable to resist such temptation, the police officer agrees. In the morning, Wonka and Noodle begin to implement their plan. The girl tells Mrs. Scrubit that she saw numerous prints with Bleacher's face at one of the clients. The man reveals that Mr. Bleacher is a descendant of a noble family from Bavaria. Mrs. Scrubit treats the top of the social pyramid with special feelings. At the same time, Wonka assures Bleacher that Mrs. Scrubit is in love with him. To melt the woman's heart, all it takes is two things: to wash up and dress neatly. While the duo is busy with child's play, Wonka presents his invention to his unfortunate colleagues. A fully automatic washing machine with a dog as the engine. Freeing his friends from monotonous work, Wonka escapes, disguised as a bag of dirty laundry. Noodle takes the boy to the city, where Wonka wants to treat the girl to sweets as a gesture of gratitude. But all the candies were stolen by a mysterious person who has already surprised the confectioner with such surprises more than once. To prepare another batch, a special ingredient is needed: giraffe milk. To get inside the zoo, Noodle offers a guard candies that have a quite strong alcohol intoxication effect. Passing inside without obstacles, the duo carries out their plan. During the process, Noodle talks about her life. The girl doesn't know and has never seen her parents. All that's left of them is a ring-shaped seal. Afterward, they leave the zoo in the best fantasy tradition, on air balloons. After a short flight, they are met by a police officer at the landing site. Wonka orders the girl to run away, and he, with external help, immerses himself in a frozen fountain. The officer explains that neither the boy nor his sweets are welcome here. Wonka doesn't understand the reason for such aggression. For better assimilation of information, the officer hits the boy on the head with a stick. When Wonka returns to Mrs. Scrubit's dry cleaner, he tells that he is a confectioner and wants to open his own production. One of the unfortunate colleagues, an accountant, reveals that he worked for the local chocolatiers. He accidentally found a black accounting. It turns out that the factory owners conspired to avoid competition by selling chocolate of questionable quality. The secret headquarters, along with the chocolate reservoir, is located under the temple. A bribed monk, Father Julius, along with his subordinates, helps keep the secret. And the chocolate cartel uses it for bribery, blackmail, and eliminating competitors. After the 10th story, everyone disperses to their rooms. At night, Wonka and Noodle contemplate a plan for the illegal sale of candies to pay off all debts. The next day, with the support of other unfortunate comrades, Wonka begins selling his sweets. After tasting the candy, people start singing and dancing. Meanwhile, the police try with all their might to catch the confectioner, but Wonka and his company have everything thought out to the smallest detail. Although at one point, the law enforcement does notice how Wonka always manages to escape from them. After that, they set up guards near every manhole. After a hard day of work, Noodle teaches Wonka to read, but the boy doesn't catch on too well. One night, Wonka manages to catch a mysterious candy thief. With the help of a self-constructed trap, the thief is locked in a jar. The robber turns out to be a man named Lofty from the Oompa Loompa tribe. Wonka asks why he's being pursued. Lofty says that Wonka ruined his life, but the young confectioner doesn't remember such an incident. Using a clever method, Wonka and Lofty delve into memories. Once, Wonka stole cocoa beans that Lofty was supposed to guard. For falling asleep on duty and losing the beans, the tribe expelled the man. Until Lofty returns what he lost, the way home is closed to him. Wonka offers to compensate Lofty for everything. Taking advantage of the moment, Oompa Loompa steals the last batch of candies and escapes. In the morning, Wonka tells everyone about what happened, but nobody believes him. Despite this, his friends prepare a surprise for the confectioner. They rented an unused store. Wonka and the company begin to make the place more or less presentable. Meanwhile, the trio of the chocolate mafia and the police officer monitor Wonka's movements. Dissatisfied with such a disposition of affairs, one of them, Arthur Slugworth, goes to Mrs. Screwbit to report the actions of her debtors and ask for help to put an end to Wonka's business. The next day, Wonka opens the doors of his store for everyone. With songs and dances, he calls guests inside, where a show and a multitude of sweets await. Visitors are delighted as they have never tasted anything so delicious before. Suddenly, the visitor's hair starts growing instantly. After analysis, Wonka understands that someone added snowman sweat to the candies. Furious guests start a riot, after which the store is engulfed in flames. With a smile on his face, Slugworth observes all of this. Wonka's associates are convinced that the chocolate cartel is behind all this. They assure that they will fix everything, and the store will work again, but Wonka is completely disappointed with this failure. When the confectioner is left alone, the trio of chocolatiers approaches him. They offer him a deal. They will pay off all debts to Mrs. Screwbit for his friends, and in return, Wonka will never make sweets again. With no other options, Wonka agrees. The trio, along with the police officer, escorts Wonka to the ship. On the deck, the confectioner notices Lofty, who shows no intention of stopping his pursuit. Lofty says that Wonka should continue making his amazing chocolate, but the boy doesn't plan to do so as he has signed a contract. During the conversation, Wonka notices the mark of Slugworth on Lofty's hand, the same mark he saw on Noodle's family heirloom. Wonka believes that the girl is in danger, so he runs to the captain to have the ship turned around. But there is no one on the ship except dynamite, which is about to blow the ship to pieces. Wonka and Lofty urgently evacuate from the ship. Meanwhile, at the dock, the chocolatiers and the police officer watch the explosion. After that, Slugworth orders his assistant to unload the officer the chocolate for completing the task. The next morning, Mrs. Screwbit releases all debtors except Noodle. Slugworth paid for her, but not for her freedom. He paid Mrs. Screwbit to keep Noodle with her for life. Saddened, the girl reveals that Bleacher is not an aristocrat at all. They made up the entire story to be able to leave the laundry unnoticed. Furious, the owner locks the girl in the pigeon loft. However, soon Wonka and his misfortunate companions come to the girl's aid. They explain Noodle their plan to kidnap the chocolate mafia's black ledger. To execute the plan, Wonka steals a giraffe, while Noodle secretly places special candies in Father Julius's pocket. The animal is delivered to the church doors. When they open, the giraffe rushes inside, causing all the priests to panic and flee. The animal runs after Father Julius, sensing the candies in his pocket. The patriarch calls the Animal Control Service, unaware that it is actually Wonka's accomplices on the other end. Wonka and the company split into two groups. While one catches the giraffe and takes it out to the street, the other finds a disguised elevator leading to the secret headquarters. By offering a guard a candy with a strong intoxicating effect, the group sneaks into the safe. They try to locate the black ledger. When Slugworth heard on the radio about strange things happening in the church, he immediately understood that Wonka was involved. Noodle eventually finds the same book, but the trio is already there. Slugworth reveals that Noodle is his brother's daughter. When the brother died, his wife brought the girl to him. He, in turn, brought her to Mrs. Screwbit. He paid her to raise the girl, but the main task was to ensure that Noodle never found out about her relatives. It was done to deprive the girl of her inheritance rights. Afterwards, Wonka and Noodle are taken to the chocolate reservoir. The boy's last wish was to save the last batch of made candies. The trio leaves the room, then opens the Hydra hatch. Chocolate slowly but confidently begins to fill the room. In a few minutes, the duo is already at the ceiling level. They call for help, but no one hears them except the trio of chocolaters. They wave goodbye and leave. Wonka apologizes to Noodle for involving her in all of this. Having resigned to their fate, the duo plunges into the chocolate. Meanwhile, Loft, with the help of a jar, stuns the patriarch, then descends to the vault. He opens the sluices, lowering the chocolate level in the room, thereby saving Wonka and Noodle's lives. Near the church, the trio encounters an officer who can barely fit into his car due to the chocolate. At the same time, Wonka comes out of the church and hands the book to one of the policemen. After reviewing the information, the officer orders the arrest of the owners of the chocolate cartel. Additionally, he orders the arrest of the police chief, who, in exchange for chocolate, turned a blind eye to all the violations of the law. The trio, not wanting to sit in prison, attempts to escape. But at that very moment, the chocolate, which gives people the effect of levitation, begins to take effect. Slugworth manages to grab onto a fountain, but not for long. Following Wonka's command, chocolate starts flowing from the fountain. While the joyful society tastes the sweet gold, Wonka sits on the steps with a smile on his face. He takes out a chocolate bar, prepared by his mother long ago. Inside, he finds a note from his mother with the main secret of chocolate. The main thing is not the chocolate itself, but with whom you share it. Later, in the crowd of people, he sees his mother, who is very happy for her son. After that, he breaks the chocolate bar and shares it with his best friends. Also, he tells Noodle that they managed to find her mother. Together, they go to the library, where after so many years, the family reunites. Meanwhile, Loft approaches Wonka. Oompa Loompa says he won't leave the boy until he gets the rest of the chocolate for the stolen cocoa beans. Immediately after these words, Wonka hands Loft a jar of sweets. The man turns around and leaves, but Wonka stops him to offer a job as the head of the tasting department. The duo heads to the ruins of an ancient castle, where Wonka wants to build his own factory. With songs and dances, Wonka presents how his factory will be arranged. They show us the emblem that adorns the top of the factory. And that's where the movie ends.